My name is Caroline Walsh, and the day I found out my parents had sold my grandfather's house behind my back, I realized something I had tried so hard not to believe my whole life. Sometimes the people you trust most will betray you with a smile. The house wasn't just real estate, it was legacy. It was love, solitude, childhood summers filled with fireflies, and the quiet wisdom of the one man who saw me for who I was. I was 35. I had worked hard to build a small but thriving architecture business in Portland, Oregon. I never asked my parents for anything, not when I needed tuition money, not when I needed help starting my business, not even when my car broke down in college and I spent a week sleeping in my studio. They knew I was strong, and maybe that made it easy for them to assume I wouldn't mind, or wouldn't notice. But I noticed. It started with a phone call I wasn't supposed to receive from my grandfather's old fishing buddy, Norman. He asked if I'd sold the lake house, and if I'd be visiting again this summer. That's when my heart dropped. I hadn't put the house on the market. I hadn't even considered it. I had just been there last fall, raking the leaves myself, sipping tea on the porch, where Grandpa Jack once carved stories into the dusk, with nothing more than a voice and a worn flannel shirt. I pulled over on the side of the road, trying to breathe. I called my mom immediately. She answered on the third ring, her voice overly bright. "Oh, sweetheart, how's your week been?" I skipped the pleasantries. "Mom, is the lake house sold?" There was a pause. Then a shift in tone so subtle it chilled me. "Caroline, I didn't want you to find out like this." I remember gripping the steering wheel so tightly my fingers went numb. "You sold my house?" "Well," she said, drawing the word out like she was about to explain why the coffee pot was broken, "your sister's wedding was coming up so quickly, and the venue required a sizable deposit. Your dad and I—" "You sold my house for Katie's wedding," my voice cracked, "without telling me?" "We were going to talk to you," she replied. "But you were so busy. And we thought, well, it's family, and you weren't really using the house that much." I hung up the phone before I said something I couldn't take back. But something inside me broke open that day. Not just because they sold my inheritance, but because they decided for me that my memories, my boundaries, my property meant less than one day of white dresses and catered shrimp towers for my sister. If you've ever stood in that impossible place between heartbreak and rage, between silence and the need to scream, hit that like button and stay with me. You'll want to hear what came next. Because the story I'm about to tell isn't just about a house. It's about what happens when you finally say no to a lifetime of being the strong one, the quiet one, the one who's expected to understand while everyone else takes. It's about what it costs to reclaim what's rightfully yours, not just a property, but your place in the family, your voice. And the day I decided to fight back, that's when everything changed. If you've ever had to protect something that mattered to you, even from your own family, leave a comment. Let's share those stories. Let's stop carrying them alone. The lake house wasn't just lumber and nails. It was Grandpa Jack's hands, his stubborn pride, his way of saying, "I see you, Caroline," even when they don't. I remember being 6 years old, helping him scrub the porch floor with a brush twice the size of my hand. He didn't laugh when I splashed more water on myself than the wood. He just nodded, handed me a dry rag, and said, "Good work starts with good messes." That house was filled with quiet truths like that. Lessons he never put into words, but left in the way the sun came through the pine trees, or how he sharpened his tools before each project. When he died, I wasn't expecting to inherit anything. Katie, my younger sister, had always been the favored one, sparkling, spontaneous, always demanding more. I was the dependable one, the one who never made a fuss, the one who would understand. But when the will was read and Grandpa left the lake house solely to me, I knew he had seen something in me no one else had. My parents' reactions should have told me everything. Katie sulked. "Why wouldn't he split it? I love that place too." A lie. She'd only visited when forced, and even then she'd grown about the bugs, the lack of Wi-Fi, the smell of old people wood. Mom wore her classic tight-lipped smile and said, "Well, honey, it's a lovely gesture. Just a bit unexpected, that's all." But my father, he didn't hide it. His jaw clenched. I saw him calculating how much it could have sold for how much easier life might have been if that house had ended up on the market. I should have known then and there that they'd never respect Grandpa's decision. Over the years, I paid the taxes. I drove 4 hours up from Portland to patch up the dockery roof. The boathouse even replaced a rusted-out septic tank without asking for help. It was my burden and my peace. Katie, meanwhile, danced from job to job and man to man, never staying long enough to let the dust settle. My parents funded her first startup, her yoga certification, even her 2-month sabbatical in Costa Rica. When I opened my own design firm, they sent a card. No check, just a card, with a Hallmark quote. Still, I never complained. I told myself this was the cost of keeping peace. Until Norman's call changed everything. After Mom admitted they sold the house, I drove to my office and sat staring out the window for almost an hour. I couldn't process it. Not just the sale, but the choice. They had looked at that deed with my name on it and decided it was just a formality. Something they could work around, something that could be handled. And what burned worse, they did it for Katie. For her third wedding, to a man she met 6 months ago. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and opened the dusty file folder I kept for the lake house. It had everything: the deed copies of Grandpa's will, the original notary forms. I sat on my couch and began reading every word. Because I knew what came next would not be a conversation. It would be war. And before you ask, no, I didn't call them. Not yet. You see, there's a moment in every betrayal where you realize you don't need an apology, you need action. You need truth to sit beside you like a loyal dog while you watch the ones who lied scramble to rewrite their story. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg for answers. I was going to gather every piece of paper, every bank record, every name tied to that deal. Because if they could forge my trust, I'd use the truth to tear down the fantasy they built. If you've ever watched someone rewrite your story in their favor while expecting you to smile and play along, tell me in the comments. Because silence was my specialty for too long. And now, I was done being quiet. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there, lights off my laptop, open to the scanned copy of Grandpa Jack's will, as if reading it one more time might make this all feel less insane. To my granddaughter Caroline Walsh, who understands the value of stillness, effort, and earned solitude, I leave the lake house and all its contents. I knew the words by heart. I could hear Grandpa's gravelly voice saying them, and now it was gone. I kept circling back to the same question: how could they do this? But the answer had been in front of me for years. I had simply chosen not to see it. Katie had always been the sun in our family. Everything revolved around her needs, her moods, her vision of the world. I was the gravitational pull beneath it all, holding the orbit steady even when it tore me apart. When we were kids, she wanted dance lessons. She got a private instructor. I wanted to go to a robotics camp. I was told to mow lawns and save up. Katie wrecked her first car. They got her a new one within a week. I commuted on the city bus during my first internship because I couldn't afford repairs. I didn't resent her, not then. I resented myself for not being enough to warrant the same. Over time, I convinced myself this was love. That being the strong one was a badge of honor, not a quiet punishment. But now that narrative cracked wide open. Because selling the lake house wasn't just unfair, it was illegal. My name was on the deed. I paid the taxes. I kept the place from falling apart. And yet my parents had moved forward as if I didn't exist. As if my voice didn't count. As if my silence could be forged like my signature. I couldn't confront them until I knew exactly what I was walking into, so I started digging. First, I called the town records office in Marlow, New Hampshire, where the lake house was located. The clerk was polite but curt, and it didn't take long for her to confirm what I feared. Yes, the sale went through 3 weeks ago. All cash offer. The deed has already transferred to the new owners. Peterson, I believe. My throat went dry. Could I request a copy of the transfer file? Absolutely, she said. Email me your ID and proof of ownership and I'll send the documents. I did it immediately. An hour later, the packet came through. And there it was. A stack of official-looking pages, notarized, signed, and there, on page 5, my name. Or at least something that looked like my name. The signature wasn't even close to mine. The curve of the W was wrong. The S looped too high. It was like a child mimicking cursive, and somehow someone had accepted it as real. That's when I knew I needed backup. I called my friend Claire, who had worked as a legal assistant at a real estate firm for a few years. She answered on the first ring. "Caroline, you okay?" "No," I said quietly. "I think my parents forged my signature and sold my house." Silence. "Then I'm coming over. Don't touch anything. Save all the files." We spent the next 6 hours cataloging everything: my deed, Grandpa's will, screenshots of emails, and even social media posts from Katie flaunting her $12,000 dress and the new SUV she'd just surprised herself with. "Where do you think that money came from?" Claire said, not even bothering to hide her disgust. "Me," I whispered. "It came from me." That night, we built a timeline. Claire flagged inconsistencies in the closing date. She pointed out that the notary listed on the documents had been retired for 2 years. Red flag after red flag piled up until I felt less like a daughter and more like a target. The worst part wasn't the money. It wasn't even the house. It was the fact that they didn't think I'd fight back. That they believed I'd swallow this like I had everything else. But they'd underestimated one thing. This time I wasn't going to stay quiet. And if you've ever been forced to carry the weight of someone else's entitlement just to keep the peace, share it below. Because maybe it's time we stop mistaking silence for strength. 2 days later, I got in my car and drove up to the lake house. The 3-hour drive from Portland to Marlow had always been a kind of therapy. Rolling hills, the slow fade of city noise into birdsong, the crunch of pine needles when I finally stepped out of the car. But this time, the road felt different, colder, sharper, like every mile I passed was taking me further from something I thought I understood. I didn't bring much, just a manila folder with all the documents. Claire and I had gathered, a notepad, and my grandfather's old pocket knife that I'd found in the toolbox he left behind. I wasn't sure why I grabbed it. Maybe I needed to hold something that still felt true. When I turned onto the gravel road leading up to the house, I noticed it immediately. The old wooden sign Grandpa had carved Walsh Haven was gone. In its place was a generic real estate placard that read, "The Petersons." My chest tightened. Then I saw the truck, movers, a couple probably mid-50s standing on the porch directing traffic. The man had a clipboard. The woman pointed toward the boathouse. My boathouse. I parked at the bottom of the driveway and walked up slowly, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. I didn't want to make a scene, but I had no idea how I was supposed to act. The woman noticed me first. "Hi there, are you from the neighborhood?" she said cheerfully, brushing dust off her hands. I took a breath. "No, I'm Caroline Walsh. This is my house." They exchanged a look, not hostile, just confused. The man Robert stepped forward, offered a hand. "I'm sorry, what?" "This house," I said again, more firmly this time. "It was left to me by my grandfather. It's in my name. I never sold it." Robert frowned. "But..." "We bought it 3 weeks ago. Closed last Friday." "From Thomas and Diane Walsh, your parents, I guess." I felt like the ground dropped under me. They didn't own it," I said. "They forged documents. They faked my signature." The couple looked genuinely horrified. Linda, the woman, brought a folder from the car. "These are all the sale papers," she said. "We went through a realtor. It all looked legitimate. And there it was again. My fake signature, the notary stamp, the lies printed in ink and now folded neatly in a folder owned by strangers living in my home." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I nodded politely, told them I'd be in touch, and walked back to my car. The moment I sat behind the wheel, everything cracked. I sobbed so hard my hands shook on the steering wheel. I cried like I hadn't in years, not just because they stole something from me, but because they looked me in the face for decades and convinced me I mattered only to turn around and sell my sanctuary like it was a favor they were undoing. That night, I drove straight back to Portland. I didn't stop. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I just got home, opened my laptop, and started making calls. Claire connected me with a real estate attorney named Jenna, who took one look at the documents and said, "This is clear fraud. Your parents committed a crime." I couldn't say it out loud, not yet. My parents committed a crime, but I nodded. I asked her, "How do we undo it?" "We'll need to file an emergency injunction," Jenna said. "And then, well, it gets messy. But you have every right to reclaim what's yours, even if that means confronting them head on." I stared at my screen and said what I'd never dared to say before. "Then let's go to war. And if you've ever had something taken from you, not just a thing, but a truth, a home, a piece of yourself, tell me about it. Because I believe we deserve to be heard. We deserve to take it back." The decision had been made. There was no turning back now. Jenna and I began preparing the legal case. She filed the injunction immediately to freeze any future transactions on the property while we built our argument. She explained that while the buyers, the Petersons, were technically innocent, the forged signature nullified the sale. The house was still mine, at least legally. Emotionally, though, that was a different story. Because while I was lawyering up and assembling documents my family was celebrating, Katie's Instagram became a daily avalanche of floral mock-ups, champagne tastings, and behind-the-scenes fittings with some designer I'd never heard of, but apparently charged $10,000 per dress. And the captions, they were always some nauseating blend of "so grateful to my family" and "dream wedding" with photos of our parents smiling, like they hadn't just committed felony fraud. What broke me most wasn't the glamour, it was the audacity. They acted like nothing had happened, like I was just gone, forgotten, irrelevant. And then came the engagement party. It was hosted at one of Boston's top-tier hotels, the kind of place where the napkins are monogrammed and someone hands you champagne before you can even say your name. I debated skipping it entirely, but skipping would raise questions, and I wasn't ready to tip my hand. Not yet. So I showed up, 20 minutes late, on purpose. The ballroom shimmered. Thousands of orchids cascaded down from the ceiling like a floral avalanche. String quartets played in corners. Ice sculptures melted quietly near the seafood towers. My mother floated across the room like the queen of a fantasy she'd constructed from stolen bricks. Katie found me instantly. "Caroline, oh my God, you look amazing," she shrieked, pulling me into a hug that smelled like rosewater and delusion. "Thanks," I said, my voice tight. She leaned in, whispering, "Wait till you see the cake. It's a replica of the estate venue with gold leaf detail." I smiled. How subtle. The party carried on. People laughed, drank, clinked glasses. I played my role, friendly sister, dutiful guest ghost, with a fixed smile. And then she did it. Katie clinked her glass and called for attention. James, her fiancé, joined her at the front of the room. And in front of nearly 200 people, my sister said the words that turned my stomach inside out. "I just want to thank everyone for being here, and especially my amazing sister Caroline, who made this day possible with the most generous gift anyone could ever imagine." She looked at me glowing. "Giving up the lake house so James and I could have the wedding of our dreams, it's something I'll never forget." Applause, cameras flashing, a spotlight in my face. I stood there frozen. Applauded by strangers for a gift I never gave. Smiling for pictures that would later be captioned, "Best Big Sis." And the worst part, my parents stood nearby, nodding, raising their glasses, playing along. They didn't just lie, they weaponized the lie. Turned it into a virtue they could wear like a badge. When the party died down and the band switched to background jazz, I found them by the dessert table. Dad had a bourbon in hand. Mom clutched a lavender macaron. "You've been quiet tonight," she said. "It's a beautiful party," I replied. My father winked. "Only the best. And that lake house money really stretched well." I looked him in the eyes. "You should check your mail tomorrow." He blinked. "What?" "Just some paperwork. Thought you'd want to stay ahead of it." And I walked away, calm, cold, controlled. If you've ever stood in the middle of a celebration that felt like a funeral for your dignity, your voice, your truth, leave a comment. You're not alone. And if this story speaks to you, subscribe, share it with someone you trust, and let's keep walking this road together. The next morning at precisely 9:00 a.m., Jenna's courier delivered a sealed envelope to my parents' front door. Inside, a certified letter of legal intent, copies of the forged sale document statements from the notary, whose name had been stolen, screenshots of Katie's wedding posts timed with the withdrawals from their bank account, and a draft of the civil fraud lawsuit we were preparing to file. At 9:15, the first call came in. "Dad." Ignored. 9:18, Mom. Ignored. Then came the texts. "Dad, Caroline, there's been a terrible misunderstanding. Mom, please call us. We need to talk." Dad again. "Don't do this to your family. We can fix it." There was no we anymore. They had already chosen their we, and I wasn't in it. I spent the rest of the day with my phone on silent. Jenna and Claire came by the apartment. We triple-checked our evidence, reviewed the backup plans, and scheduled a meeting with a criminal attorney for the following week. Even though I wasn't sure I wanted to press charges, I needed to know every option. Because the truth was, even winning would be complicated. The Petersons, the couple who bought the house, were victims too. They'd spent money, moved across the country, and were now stuck in a home they technically didn't own. Jenna said we could reverse the sale through the courts, but the Petersons would likely need to be compensated and they'd have every right to pursue damages. By noon, extended family started reaching out. Aunt Denise called. "Your mom says there's some kind of legal mistake. Something about you being angry over a wedding gift." Cousin Brian texted, "Is it true you're suing your parents over a house?" They were spinning the story fast, painting me as emotional, ungrateful, vindictive. It was familiar, too familiar. When I was 16 and refused to lend Katie my prom dress, I was difficult. When I turned down her request to redesign her website for free last year, I was selfish. But this time, they couldn't spin the facts. They could twist feelings, but not the paper trail. At 100 p.m., a new number appeared on my screen, international. I picked up out of instinct. "Katie!" "What the hell, Caroline?" Her voice was shrill, panicked. "Mom and Dad are freaking out. They said you're suing them the day after my engagement party. What is wrong with you? I took a breath. Did they tell you why? There was a pause. They said you agreed to help with the wedding, and now you changed your mind. Did they tell you they forged my signature, that they sold Grandpa's house without my knowledge? Silence. I didn't know about the signature, she mumbled. They just told me you were okay with it. That it was a gift. And you believed that... Another pause. You've always been the one who sacrifices, she said. I thought maybe you just did it again. That cut deeper than I expected. Not because it was cruel, but because it was honest. For so long, that had been my identity. The one who gave without being asked. The one who understood. I built a whole personality around it, around being the reliable sister, the unfussy daughter, the one who didn't need. And they used it? They bet on it? Katie's voice softened. We're coming back early. James is furious. I'm not sorry about that, I said flatly. This was their choice, not mine. She started crying. You're tearing the family apart. No, I said, my voice steady now. They did that. I'm just the one putting it on record. And if you've ever been labeled the villain just for finally drawing a line, share your story below. Because sometimes the only way to be free is to let them call you the enemy. I didn't hear from Katie again for a few days after that call, but my phone didn't stop buzzing. Mom tried every angle, guilt, nostalgia, fear. Her messages came like clockwork. Your sister is devastated. You know how much this will hurt your father. We raised you better than this. And then the one that landed like a punch to the ribs. We just wanted the best for everyone. Why are you trying to destroy the family? But I wasn't the one who lit the match. I was the one who stopped pretending the house wasn't burning. That weekend, Jenna and I met with Martin, the criminal defense attorney. He was calm, precise, and frighteningly direct. This is a textbook case of real estate fraud, he said. Forgery, unauthorized sale, financial gain through deception. It's all here. If we go to the district attorney, there's a very real possibility your parents will face charges. Felonies. My stomach twisted. Is there any way to resolve this without jail time, I asked. He nodded slowly. If they cooperate, if they repay the money, acknowledge the fraud, and the DA is willing, we could push for probation, restitution, mandatory counseling. But the timeline will be tight, and the damage is already done. By now, the Petersons had retained their own counsel. They were upset, confused, but thankfully not hostile toward me. Jenna and I had sent them a full statement and offered our support in helping them recover what they lost. We bought this place thinking it would be our retirement, Mrs. Peterson wrote in an email. We sold our home in Utah to be near our grandkids. We trusted the paperwork. We didn't know. That's what made this so complex. My parents hadn't just hurt me, they'd hurt innocent people who believed they were buying a dream. And I was stuck trying to clean up a mess that wasn't mine. The morning after our meeting with Martin, I finally opened the letter I'd been rewriting for a week. It wasn't for lawyers. It wasn't for the court. It was for them. For my parents. A quiet, cold reckoning, not just about the lake house, but everything. I wrote, what you did wasn't just illegal. It was personal. It was betrayal wrapped in good intentions, theft, dressed up as love. You didn't just steal a house. You stole trust. You stole the last real thing Grandpa gave me. And you did it in silence, expecting I would be too. I didn't sign it with love. I signed it with my full name. Like I was reclaiming it on paper in blood. Then I printed a copy, folded it neatly, and placed it in the back of the final legal package Jenna prepared to send. The timing was deliberate. The wedding was 7 days away. And yes, I planned to attend, because there were still details I needed to witness, still faces I needed to see, still a story to finish, and because walking away from this quietly would have made me just as complicit. So I straightened my shoulders, practiced my polite smile, and RSVP'd yes. I'd be there, not for celebration, not for family, but to gather the final pieces of the story they thought I wouldn't write. If you've ever sat at a table surrounded by people clinking glasses to a lie, hit that like button and tell me what you did next. Because survival isn't always quiet. Sometimes it's about watching the ones who buried the truth realize you brought a shovel of your own. The week leading up to the wedding was like watching a Broadway show unfold with every lie choreographed down to the second. My mother sent daily group emails with itinerary updates, manicures at the Ritz, spa appointments for the bridesmaids' rehearsal dinner menu tastings. Katie texted me a dozen times with photos of centerpieces and mock-ups for the seating chart. My father called once to check in and ended the conversation with, "This is such a special time for your sister. Let's not ruin it." I didn't respond because I wasn't going to ruin it. I was going to let them finish the show, and then I'd bring the curtain down. The wedding rehearsal was held at the church where Katie had been baptized back when our parents still believed in tradition. She swept in wearing a silk white cocktail dress and a diamond necklace so large it looked more like a statement than jewelry. She looked radiant, flawless, like someone born to be adored. I stood to the side wearing the pale mauve dress she'd chosen for the bridesmaids. She hadn't asked my opinion. She just sent a text. This shade makes everyone look elegant. Trust me. The photographer snapped shots of us posing on the church steps. I smiled on cue, adjusted her train, held her bouquet when needed. I played the part. That's what I'd done for most of my life anyway. Showed up, stayed small, made space for Katie to shine. After the rehearsal, we gathered for dinner at an upscale bistro downtown. The room was draped in fairy lights and filled with laughter. I watched as my parents made toasts, as James, her fiancé, gushed about how grateful he was for the family support. And then Katie stood. She tapped her glass lightly and smiled. "I just want to say thank you," she began, her voice catching in that practiced, endearing way. "This year has been the most magical of my life, and I know none of this would be possible without the love and generosity of my family." She looked at me, especially my sister Caroline. Giving up something so special so that James and I could have our dream wedding, it still brings me to tears. Her voice cracked, perfectly timed. "You've always put others first, Caroline. And I hope you know from the bottom of my heart that I will never forget what you gave us." The entire room applauded. People clinked glasses, smiled at me, a few even stood to toast. I raised my glass slightly and nodded. That was all I could manage. 'Cause what could I say? You're welcome for the thing I never gave. After dinner, I stepped out onto the restaurant's terrace, needing air. The city buzzed below, alive with strangers. I leaned against the railing and stared out over the streetlights, trying to anchor myself. The hurt pulsed, not just from what they took, but from how easily they twisted it into a public virtue. They'd built a fairy tale and cast me as the noble sister who gave it all up out of love. But love doesn't steal. Love doesn't lie. Love doesn't write your signature for you and sell your soul wrapped in monogrammed wedding favors. Just as I was about to head back in, my Aunt Marie joined me. She held a flute of champagne and offered a small smile. "I heard about the house," she said softly. "Your mom said you weren't using it much anymore. But still, that must have been hard." My throat tightened. "Did she also mention they didn't tell me before they sold it?" I asked. Marie blinked. "No, she didn't mention that part." I nodded. "That's because it's not part of the story they're selling." She looked away, uncomfortable. "You always were the strong one," she murmured. I turned to her. "That's not strength, that's silence." She didn't reply. Inside, the music swelled. The night wore on. And I knew this was the last time I'd pretend to belong in a room that applauded theft dressed in lace and good intentions. If you've ever been asked to smile through betrayal just to keep the peace, drop a comment. You deserve to be heard, even if they never apologized. And if you believe silence isn't strength but survival, hit subscribe and stay with me. The truth is only just beginning. The wedding day arrived like it had been written in the stars. A cloudless sky, temperatures in the low 70s, not a breeze out of place. It was quite literally the perfect day for a lie to live its final hours. The ceremony was held at St. Margaret's Episcopal Church, a towering old building with stained glass windows that cast colors across the pews like some divine Instagram filter. I arrived early, another request from Katie, so the photographer could get pre-ceremony candids. Candids that were very much staged, of course. Every shot had a mood board, every moment a purpose. Katie wore her $15,000 French gown like it had been sewn onto her. The beaded lace shimmered as she walked the 12-foot train, fanned out like royalty. Her hair was swept into a sleek updo. Her bouquet of imported orchids cost more than my first semester of college. But it was her smile that really struck me. It wasn't joy. It was performance, precision. A woman at the center of her world, believing truly she had earned every inch of the spotlight. I, in my pale pink bridesmaid gown, stood quietly to the side. The ceremony unfolded like clockwork, string quartet flower girl, in a tiara, custom-written vows, a solo opera singer belting Ave Maria. When Katie and James kissed, the crowd stood in ovation. I clapped too, mechanically, out of habit. But inside I was somewhere else entirely. I was on the dock of the lake house, 7 years old. Feet in the water, Grandpa Jack handing me a root beer and saying, "Still water teaches you how to listen, not just talk." I could still smell the cedar in the beams, hear the porch door creak, feel the worn grooves in the banister. All of that was supposed to be mine to protect, and I'd let it be taken. After the ceremony, guests were shuttled to the Rosemore Estate, a sprawling venue that looked like it had been plucked from a European castle catalogue. There were crystal chandeliers in every room, endless strings of fairy lights overhead, and centerpieces so large they blocked people's faces. Dinner included Wagyu beef butter poached lobster and a tower of gold-dusted desserts that looked too expensive to eat. Katie and James entered the ballroom to thunderous applause descending a staircase lined with candles. I watched it all with detached fascination like I was observing a documentary on excess. Then midway through dinner, my father stood with his glass raised. He tapped his fork smiling like a man who still thought he controlled the narrative. To my beautiful daughter, he said, his voice proud and glossy. And her new husband. Your mother and I could not be prouder. We spared no expense today because we believe some days deserve that kind of love. There were cheers, toasts, clinking glasses. Then Katie stood again, this time her voice thick with emotion or performance it was getting harder to tell. I just want to say, she looked around the room, to everyone here thank you, but especially to my sister Caroline. She turned to me, tears welling up. I know how much that lake house meant to you, and the fact that you were willing to let it go for my dream day. I don't even have words. You gave us this. You gave us everything. The room erupted in applause. Everyone turned to look at me, some teary-eyed, some admiring, and I simply raised my champagne glass and nodded once. Because what else do you do when you're being celebrated for your own betrayal? As the music swelled and people returned to their filet mignons, I slipped out to the terrace. The air outside was cooler, quieter. I leaned on the railing and closed my eyes. The applause still echoed in my ears, but this time it wasn't approval, it was thunder before the storm. Inside that ballroom they toasted to my silence, my sacrifice. But I wasn't silent anymore. And the sacrifice that was theirs to make. If you've ever stood in a room full of people who believed a version of your life that wasn't true, a version written by someone else, leave your voice in the comments. Let's take our stories back one truth at a time. And if you're still with me, hit that, leave your thoughts and subscribe. The next chapter gets real. The wedding rolled on into the night like nothing could touch it. There were choreographed dances, fireworks, a live band flown in from New York. Guests laughed, drank and toasted again and again to love to family, to the kind of fairy tale people envy from a distance, never suspecting what was buried beneath the glittering surface. But I wasn't watching the show anymore. I was counting the cost, the gold leaf desserts, the imported flowers, the fleet of vintage cars waiting to take guests back to their hotels. It was all built on a foundation of theft, my home, my inheritance, my history. Toward midnight, I stood alone near the dessert table watching the band finish their final set. That's when my parents approached, faces still flushed from wine and applause. You've been quiet all night, Mom said, her voice sweet and airy. It's a beautiful wedding, I replied, carefully neutral. The best money could buy, Dad added with a wink. Or should I say, the best lake house could buy. He laughed. My stomach turned. Mom touched my arm, squeezing gently. We never really thanked you, for understanding, for being the bigger person. I looked at them both. They were smiling, relaxed. They truly believed they'd gotten away with it. That the applause meant forgiveness. That a beautiful party could bury the truth. I smiled too, just enough. You should check your mail tomorrow. Dad blinked. What's that supposed to mean? Just some information I think you'll want to read. I turned and walked away, leaving them standing in silence, their expressions shifting slowly from amusement to confusion. That single moment of disorientation on their faces, that was the first time I felt something close to peace in weeks. Because for once I held the truth and they didn't. I left the estate shortly after the sparkler send-off when Katie and James drove off in a vintage Bentley, showered in rose petals and champagne fog. They waved at the crowd faces, glowing the picture of young love. And I went home and hit send. Jenna had prepared a precise, thorough legal package, full of the kind of details that make prosecutors lean in. At exactly 9:00 a.m. the next morning, a courier delivered copies of the documents to my parents' doorstep. Simultaneously, I emailed them my letter, the one I'd revised 15 times, the one that stripped the narrative down to raw truth. It was time. At 9:12, my phone rang. Dad ignored. 9:14, Mom ignored. 9:16, text message, what is this, Caroline, call us immediately. 9:17, seen another, there's been a terrible misunderstanding, we need to talk. 20, you can't do this. Not to us, not to your sister. But I could. Because I already had. And if you've ever been made the villain in your own story, just for protecting what was yours, drop your voice below. If you're tired of being called difficult for setting boundaries, for saying no, for fighting back when no one thought you would, then you belong here. And if this story mirrors even a shadow of your own, hit that subscribe button. We're not done yet. Not by a long shot. By noon, the phone calls had stopped. Not because they accepted anything. My parents never accepted consequences without a performance first. No, they were busy staging the next act. Around 12:30, my cousin Emily texted me, "Hey, what's going on?" "Your parents just called Uncle Mike and Aunt Laura. They're saying you're threatening them over Grandpa's will." And just like that, they pivoted from denial to defense. They weren't fraudsters, they were victims. Victims of a dramatic, ungrateful daughter with a vendetta. They called nearly every relative on their contact list, painting a picture of misunderstanding, heartbreak, and betrayal, mine not theirs. By 1:00 p.m., I had 4 missed calls from extended family. One voicemail ended with, "Just try to forgive Caroline. Life's too short for grudges." The gaslighting had gone public, but I wasn't scared anymore, because this time I had receipts and a team. Jenna emailed me that the Petersons' lawyer had reached out. They weren't angry, just hurt and confused. The couple had invested not only their savings into the lake house, but also their trust, and now they had no legal claim to it. Jenna reassured them that restitution would be pursued separately, but they'd still need to vacate. Because fraud, even beautiful fraud, doesn't hold up in court. At 3:00 p.m., my father sent one final message: family meeting, tomorrow, 2 p.m. at the house, please come. Claire raised an eyebrow when I showed her. They think this is something a group hug can fix. I shook my head. No. They think if I show up alone, they can regain control. We made a plan. The next day, I arrived at my parents' house, not alone, but with Jenna at my side. Her crisp navy suit and calm demeanor were a kind of armor I'd never had growing up. My mother opened the door, her expression flickering between surprise and tight-lipped resentment. "This was meant to be family," she said. "This stopped being just a family matter when you forged legal documents," I replied. Inside, the living room was staged like an intervention. Katie sat on the couch in sweats, her makeup smudged, her eyes swollen. James hovered behind her like a statue. My Uncle Mark and Aunt Lauren sat awkwardly by the fireplace. Reinforcements. Dad gestured for me to sit. I didn't. "I want to start by saying, we never meant for things to get this far," he said. "There were mistakes, yes, but we thought we had your understanding." "You thought I'd stay silent," I corrected. He ignored that. "We thought you hadn't been using the house much, and with Katie's wedding—" "You mean the $150,000 circus you threw using my inheritance?" Mom flinched. "Caroline, we were going to talk to you. It just spiraled." "You forged my signature," I said, my voice steady. "You stole. You lied to me, to everyone." Silence. Katie finally spoke. Her voice was brittle. "They told me you agreed, that it was a gift. I didn't know they forged anything." "And you never thought to check with me?" I asked. "Even when you were thanking me in front of 200 people. I didn't want to ruin the day." And there it was. Every decision they'd made had been about protecting the performance. The illusion, the fantasy of the perfect family. Even if it meant gutting the only person who ever stayed quiet. I handed them a printed breakdown of the restitution we were seeking, total value of the home damages, legal fees. Jenna explained the consequences clearly, no threats, just facts. They paled. My father mumbled, "What do you want from us?" "To make it right," I said, "and to stop pretending this was ever okay." And for once, they didn't have a script. If you've ever walked into a room where people expected you to forget, not forgive, but forget just to keep their comfort intact, I see you. Hit that like, share this story, and subscribe, because standing up doesn't make you cruel. It makes you clear. The silence that followed was the kind that fills a courtroom before a verdict is read. Jenna sat next to me, calm and unreadable. My parents, however, looked like people who had finally been told the truth in a language they couldn't misinterpret. Documentation. Legal binding, consequences. "I want the house back," I said. "I want the full value repaid. I want damages for the emotional toll, and I want public acknowledgement of what you did." My mother blinked rapidly. My father looked down at the floor like it might hold an escape hatch. "And if we can't pay all of it?" he asked, voice hoarse. "Then the court will decide," Jenna replied before I could speak. "But I assure you, Caroline has enough evidence to win, easily." Katie shifted in her seat. Her voice was small but cutting in its honesty. "We always assumed you'd say yes, Caroline. Even if we didn't ask. You've always been the one to fix things." She wasn't wrong. When Dad lost money on a bad investment, I quietly helped cover part of their mortgage. When Katie crashed her car junior year, I was the one who took the bus to make space in our already thin family finances for her new wheels. I was the one who showed up, held my breath, and swallowed my pride. Until now. You assumed wrong, I said. Then my Aunt Lauren spoke surprisingly. I didn't know, she said softly, almost like to herself. I truly didn't know any of this. But watching you now, I don't blame you, Caroline. I blame the pattern. The one we all ignored. There was a shift in the room. Tiny, but real. The kind that happens when one person finally tells the truth out loud and everyone else feels the echo in their bones. Jenna handed over the agreement packet. You'll need to begin restitution immediately. We're open to negotiating terms, but the full amount must be repaid. The Petersons, as you know, will also be seeking damages. My dad took the papers like they were radioactive. I don't want you in jail, I said before standing up. But if that's what it takes, I won't stop this. Mom opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked older suddenly, like the weight of decades had finally found her shoulders. I think we need help, she whispered. Counseling, Jenna said plainly. Will be mandatory under any agreement. No one argued. I turned to Katie last. You wanted a wedding built on fairy tales, I said. Now you know the price. She nodded once. You're right. I didn't ask questions because I didn't want the answers. I paused at the door, glancing one last time at the family that had always asked for my silence, never my truth. I'll be in touch, I said. But from now on, we speak plainly, or not at all. We left the house with no shouting, no tears, no scenes. Just facts and consequences sitting heavy in the air. That night, I walked along the river in Portland, letting the wind slap at my face. I felt raw, but also awake. Like some part of me had been trapped under years of expectations and had finally clawed its way back into the light. I was never going to be the same again, and I didn't want to be. If you've ever walked away from a conversation where the truth finally got its turn, drop a comment. Let someone else know they're not alone. And if you believe some lies are too expensive to ignore, hit that like and subscribe. The reckoning is real, but so is the healing. The weeks that followed were equal parts catharsis and chaos. My parents, under Jenna's supervision, began liquidating assets, mutual funds, retirement accounts, even putting their vacation timeshare on the market to repay what they owed. It wasn't enough to make things whole, but it was a start. The Petersons were patient, though understandably upset. Jenna negotiated a settlement that included reimbursement of their moving costs, temporary housing legal fees, and a portion of damages for emotional distress. They agreed to vacate within 30 days. I offered to help them find a new place. They politely declined. We know it wasn't your fault, Linda Peterson told me over the phone, but it still hurts to live inside someone else's grief. That stuck with me. The lake house wasn't just the scene of a crime, it had become a symbol of everything I'd let build up inside me. Resentment, silence, the belief that my needs were negotiable. And now I had to walk back into it. Literally. I drove up alone on a rainy Sunday morning, unsure of what I'd feel when I arrived. The old driveway was lined with damp pine needles. The mailbox still bore the Petersons' name in temporary stick-on letters. But when I opened the door, the smell hit me cedar and lake water. The bones of the place were still the same. I stepped inside. The furniture had changed, of course, but the light still slanted in from the east-facing windows the way it always had. The floorboards still creaked in the exact spots Grandpa used to say meant the house was talking back. I sat down on the floor in the middle of the empty living room and cried. Not from sadness, not even from anger, but from release. The kind of tears that come when you realize you finally chose yourself after a lifetime of being told that doing so was selfish. Over the next few weekends, I began restoring the house piece by piece. I replaced the locks, sanded the porch rail, ordered new curtains. I found Grandpa's fishing pole in the attic, still carefully wrapped in the old towel he used to keep it in. I hung his photo above the fireplace right where he used to sit with his morning coffee. Every nail I hammered, every floorboard I cleaned felt like stitching myself back together. I started spending one weekend a month there, sometimes alone, sometimes with a close friend or two. It became a space for healing, not hiding. For clarity, not escape. My parents stayed quiet during this time. They sent payments on schedule. They kept their distance. Katie, however, surprised me. A month after the wedding, she called. I returned most of the gifts, she said. It wasn't an apology, but it was something. I can't pretend I understand everything you felt, she admitted, but I get that I benefited from it. All of it. The house, the wedding, the lies. And I think some part of me always knew you wouldn't have given that place up. Not willingly. I didn't say much. I didn't have to. We weren't ready for some deep sisterly bond. But we were maybe done pretending. And in that quiet, fragile space, I felt something shift. Boundaries had been drawn, respect was no longer optional, and I finally wasn't the only one holding it all up. If you've ever started over with the people who hurt you, not to forget but to move forward, drop your story below. Healing isn't clean, it isn't quick, but it is possible. And if this part of the journey resonates with you, hit like, leave a comment, and subscribe. The story isn't over, but now it's finally mine to tell. 6 months after the wedding, I hosted my first gathering at the lake house. It wasn't anything grand, just a few close friends, the kind who'd stayed beside me when my world cracked open. Claire brought homemade chili. Jenna arrived with a bottle of wine and a stack of unreadable legal thrillers. We built a fire in the pit Grandpa had laid stone by stone decades ago, and sat under the stars wrapped in flannel, watching the embers rise into the night sky. No champagne towers, no string quartets, just laughter and peace and the low hum of belonging. At some point during the night, Claire raised her glass. To Caroline, she said, her voice steady, who reminded us all that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. It hit harder than I expected. Because for years I'd worn the mask of the self-sufficient one, the strong daughter, the mature sister, and that persona had become a prison. Every time I swallowed disappointment, every time I kept quiet to keep the peace, I carved out another piece of myself and gave it away until the lake house was the only thing left I hadn't handed over. And they took that too, until I took it back. Later that night, after everyone had left, I sat alone on the dock with a blanket over my shoulders, listening to the lake lap gently against the wood. In the distance, a loon cried low and mournful. The stars reflected off the water like scattered diamonds. This time the silence wasn't loneliness. It was peace. Katie and I still spoke occasionally, not often and not about the house, but we were civil, tentative. There was a moment a few weeks prior when she called to tell me she was expecting her first child. "I think we're going to name her Emma," she said. There was a pause. "I want her to know you," she added quietly. "And I want her to know the lake house and Grandpa Jack's stories." It was the closest thing to an apology she'd ever offered, and it meant more than she probably knew. 2 years after the wedding, my parents asked to visit the lake house. I wasn't sure I was ready, but I said yes on one condition: it would be a short visit, an afternoon, no sleepovers, no family dinners, just truth. They arrived with a store-bought pie and awkward smiles. We walked through the house in near silence. My mom paused by the photo of Grandpa Jack over the fireplace. "He would have been proud of this," she whispered. "Of you." My dad, ever pragmatic, touched the refinished kitchen counters. "Solid work," he said. We sat on the back porch for a while. They didn't try to apologize again. They didn't defend what they'd done. And maybe that was enough. Because reconciliation isn't always about full forgiveness, it's about recognition. They saw the damage. They weren't pretending anymore. Before they left, my mom turned to me. "We thought we were doing what was best," she said, "for Katie, for the family. But we didn't realize what we were taking until it was gone." I nodded. That's the thing about taking advantage of the strong one. You don't notice you're leaning on them until they move. They didn't argue. They just walked to their car and drove off. And I walked back into my home. My home. No longer a symbol of pain, no longer a battleground. Just mine. If you've ever turned a place of loss into a place of strength, leave a comment. Let someone else know it's possible. And if you've learned that peace sometimes looks like distance, like boundaries, like quiet ownership, hit like and subscribe. The final chapter is coming, and it's the one I waited my whole life to write. My name is Caroline Walsh, and this is the story of how I took back what was rightfully mine, and in the process took back myself. It wasn't just about a house. It was about boundaries, about identity, about finally saying I matter. For years I let my family define me by my silence and sacrifice. I thought being strong meant giving up my own needs. But strength is not self-erasure. Strength is claiming your truth even when it costs everything. I rebuilt the lake house stone by stone, memory by memory. It became more than a place. It was a sanctuary, a testament to the woman who refused to be invisible any longer. Katie and I remain cautiously civil. The wounds aren't healed, but they're no longer bleeding. My parents have entered counseling confronting the patterns that tore us apart. And me, I've learned that family isn't just the people who share your blood. It's the people who respect your boundaries, honor your truth, and stand beside you when the world tries to silence you. The hardest lesson. Sometimes standing up for yourself means standing apart. It means redefining family on your own terms. And that's okay, because your story matters. If you're listening and you've ever been told to stay quiet, to take less, to accept less, know this. You have the right to say no, to protect what's yours, to demand respect. And sometimes the greatest courage is simply choosing yourself. If this story has touched you, if you see your own fight reflected in mine, please leave a comment below. Share your truth, because every voice adds strength to the chorus of those who refuse to be erased. And if you believe in the power of standing up, of reclaiming your space in the world, I invite you to subscribe and join me. Together we write the next chapters not just of our own lives, but of a world where respect, honesty, and love aren't optional, they're essential. Thank you for walking this journey with me. Remember, the most important relationship you will ever have is the one with yourself. Protect it fiercely. After everything I learned that healing isn't a straight line. It's a winding path full of setbacks and revelations. Taking back what was stolen from me, my home, my heritage, my voice was only the beginning of a deeper journey. Rebuilding trust with my family and with myself required patience and boundaries stronger than any house walls. I realized that sometimes the most important fight is the one you have within. The battle to recognize your own worth beyond what others expect or take for granted. It's about reclaiming your narrative, saying clearly, I matter. My needs matter, my boundaries matter, and standing firm even when the world tries to silence you. Family is complicated. It can be both sanctuary and battlefield. But true family respects, honors, and supports, not just takes. So if you find yourself caught in a story where your voice is ignored or your heart is broken, remember you are not alone. You deserve to protect your peace and your legacy. Saying no, standing up, and sometimes stepping away are acts of strength, not weakness. This house, the lake house, is more than wood and stone. It's the place where I found my power, where I learned that survival means owning your truth unapologetically, and that the greatest legacy we can leave is the courage to be ourselves fully and fiercely. Thank you for listening. If this story resonated with you, I hope it gives you courage to stand tall and speak your truth no matter the cost. The journey isn't easy, but it's worth it. If you believe in the power of self-respect and healing, please subscribe, share your story below, and let's continue walking this path together.